Seeing a multiple row lookup in action is something that invokes a lot of interest among working professionals. So we're going to use this video to see how and what kind of series of steps are to be followed in achieving this. So we have a very simple little example here where we have a table with a list of two countries that are segmented by age structure, and you have the population percentage defined here as well. And at the bottom, we have created a lookup based on the name of the country. So if I go and change this to India, you can see the values for the population percentages have been updated. So if I go and change it again, you can see it is dynamically changing. So the best part about doing a multiple row lookup using functions is that it uses very minimal resources and it's very flexible in terms of what you can do. Right? So the only thing is you need to understand what are the series of steps. So once you understand those series of steps, it will be very easy to implement even the most complex criteria. Okay, so to understand this, let's go through each of the steps. Step 1 is identify the Boolean values using the set criteria. So the criteria here is a single one. We just need to define what the country is, right? So to understand this in detail, I'll just provide the same input here. I'll mention it as UAE. And then here it says identify the Boolean values. That is where it stands true and where it stands false. So for these 6 rows, we'll define where UAE stands true. Right? So the first 3 rows, it stands false. And for the last 3 rows, it stands true. Correct? Perfect. Now, what we will do is we will try and implement this formula over here. Okay, so we'll just delete the output and we'll just try implementing the first step over here, right? And we'll build it as we go along. So we can achieve this formula by just saying, okay, select the criteria UA here. I'll just freeze the cell. Okay, function F4, where it is equal to the country, the list of countries. So once I do this, I can see that there is a value error, but then let me also put this in brackets so it's easier. Okay, if I do a function F9, I can see the Boolean values exactly how we had done it manually, right? So that is the first step that we have achieved. Right? Okay, cool. So now what we will do is we will just copy this formula as it is. I'm just going to copy this formula and we will just put it down here so we know exactly how we went about getting the first step sorted. Okay, now we will work on the next step, that is extract row numbers of the matching transactions. Right? So the row numbers for the matching transaction would be these 3 rows, right? So we'll need to fetch the row number. So what we'll do, we'll just type in row number and we'll say row. So we have a function called row and then we'll just select that particular cell corresponding to that row and then we'll just drag it down. Okay, I got the row number over here. So it's the row number for each of these rows. But then we'll also have to keep in mind that we are referring to the row number not of the entire sheet but of the table. So if you consider the table, it is starting from row number 2 in the spreadsheet, right? So 29.7 is in row number 1 in the data table. So similarly, 20.4 in for UAE is in row number 4 within the data table. So what we will do here is we'll just deduct 1 for the header, right? So then we know exactly which row number within the data table we are referring to. Correct. So now we have the correct list of rows. But then we only want those rows which stand true. Correct? We don't want to see the row numbers which stand false for our criteria. So what we will do here is we are going to divide the row number by the Boolean value. So what do you mean by these Boolean values, right? So anywhere you have false, it refers to 0, right? And wherever it is true, it refers to 1. So Boolean value false refers to 0, Boolean value of true refers to 1. So when you divide the row number by 0, you're going to get an error. And when you divide the row number by 1, it returns the same number. So that's what we're going to achieve here. So we'll say row number, we'll just say row divided by the UA criteria, correct? So we'll just do that. So we'll just divide this, we'll just edit the formula, and we're going to divide this by the Boolean value. Okay, perfect. So now I'm starting to get zero division errors. Perfect. So I'm getting the correct rows that I want to extract. So for the criteria UAE, the correct rows from which we want to extract the information is in row number 4, 5, and 6 within the data table. Okay, so that is step number 2. So let's go and implement the step number 2 over here. So what we will do is we will create the formula here, that is rows of row of all these cells divided by the formula that we had copied, correct? So we had copied the formula in step 1. I'm just dividing it by that, and that would give us again a value error. But now if we go in and type function F9, we get exactly the correct row numbers. Okay, the only thing that we missed out is we forgot to deduct one row. So let's do that as well. Let's deduct that one row from here, -1. Now if I go in and do function F9, I can see the correct list of row numbers, 4, 5, and 6. The remaining are all errors. Perfect. So step 2 is also done. So I'll just copy this formula against step 2. So we're just building the formula here. Okay, perfect. So step 2 is also done. The third step is to apply the aggregate function to extract the row numbers in sequence. Okay, so what do we mean by this? So over here we got the correct row numbers, but then all these row numbers should not be hidden within one cell, right? We need to extract it individually for each cell. So in order for us to do that, we can use the aggregate function. So we are already introduced to the aggregate function in the previous sections. So we also realize that the aggregate function has some additional functions as well. So one of them is small, which are basically used with array functions, right? So what we'll do is we'll just use the array function here. Aggregate function, aggregate, and then it asks for the function number. So if you look up the documentation, if I want to use the function small, I will use the number 15, right? So what do we mean by small over here? See, now we have row number 4, 5, and 6. So I want the smallest value first, right? So I want the smallest value to come out from there. So the smallest value is the number 4, right? So I want to extract something that is there from row number 4. So I'm using the function 15, which refers to small. And then option is 6, which we had already explored. 6 basically ignores errors. So that's exactly what we want. So we don't want the zero division errors to create a problem in our aggregate function. And the third parameter is the array. So the array we had already worked on. So we are just going to copy, we're just going to paste that formula that we had worked on. Perfect. And then the last parameter for the aggregate function is the k sequence. That is, which sequence do you want? You want the first value, right? So I'll just put 1. So if I put 1 here, it's going to return row number 4 because that was the first value that was there within the array, correct? So if I want the second value, so what we'll do is we'll just copy this formula and paste it. So it returns the same thing because I need to change the sequence. So I need the second smallest value. And if I go and paste this formula again here, I need the third smallest value. Okay. So I get the corresponding rows, row number 4, 5 and 6. So if I go and change this to India, I can see that it changes the list of rows. So since I've got the corresponding row number, it's going to be very easy to extract the column information because we had already seen in the previous section how we can use the index function to extract column information using row numbers. Okay, so before we get to that, let's again copy this formula. I'm just going to copy this and I'm going to paste it here. Okay, we'll do that. So the fourth step is to use index to extract the desired column information. So we'll do that. We'll get rid of this and we'll say index. Okay, and it asks for the array. The array name here is population ratio. Perfect. And the row number. So we don't have to manually give any row number there. We have already worked on the formula, so I'm just going to paste that formula there. Perfect. And then what is the next value that is being asked is the column number. So we have a very straightforward spreadsheet. So we know within our table the column number is 3. So I'm just going to provide 3. Okay, I'm going to execute it. There you go. So I get 29.7 for India. So if I just drag it down, oh, sorry. The only problem here is if I just simply drag it down, I will also need to change the sequence, right? So I need the second sequence and here I will need the third sequence. So we'll just need to change that value accordingly and then we are sorted, right? So we'll just change that. We'll just drag it down and then change the value to the third sequence, right? So this is how we use a series of steps to actually extract multiple row values. So I'm just going to copy this formula as well. So we can just put that down here. So this is how initially when you're trying to understand this, it would be great if you split it up into different steps and you build the formula as you go along. So this will also help you to detect any errors that come along the way, right? So I hope you enjoyed working on multiple row lookups. So we'll wrap up this course with one more interesting video on multiple criteria lookups.